Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is day 3 of our 6-step framework free training, and I am so pleased that you are here and that you have made it this far. I hope that you have benefited from the last 2 lessons. I know that there was a lot to take in. I know that there were some mindset shifts that needed to take place, maybe some words of honesty as well that may have given you, something to think about. Then this is good, because I think that, when we share honestly, that's when we get the most benefit, inshallah, from our sharing. And so, just to recap, what we've covered over the last 2 days is mindset and habits. And I'm sure I don't need to remind you of the mindset lessons, but I will anyway. The first was owning your voice and your right to tell your story. The second was creating a safe space for you to explore your writing. And the third was connecting with the deeper meaning of your writing. So that was mindset. Then we went on to habits, and we looked at the 5 habits of successful Muslim writers. We talked a little bit about what success means and what it looks like. And we went into the habits, and they were to be proactive. That was a major one. Being proactive, reading, writing regularly. So we were reading widely, wisely, and well. Writing on a regular basis. The 4th was prioritizing your writing, and the 5th was learning, having a learning mindset, having a learning stance as writers, inshallah. And then I said that today I was going to share with you the practical elements, because now we've got the mindset, we feel confident, we feel pumped up, we feel ready, and we know it's going to take some hard work, it's going to take some commitment, but then we're still left wondering, okay, now what? How do I even get started? And so that is what we will be looking at today. So in this lesson, I'll be sharing with you the 6-step framework, which I love that phrase, by the way, as you can probably tell. 6-step framework for writing, for going from idea to polished manuscript. Okay, and why I've devised it as a framework and why the framework works so well is that you know what's coming next. So you know, once you've done this, this is what you do. And then you do that. So you're not kind of jumping between something that is maybe something you should be doing at the beginning and then jumping to something that's later on the stage. Once you know the 6-step framework, you will know exactly what you need to do next to move your project forward. And you will not be tempted, inshallah, to jump ahead, to do something that is further down the path, okay? You take things step by step. So, where do we begin? Before I go into the 6-step framework, I'd like to just share with you a little bit about my writing process and where most of my book ideas come from, okay? Interestingly enough, most of my book ideas actually come from dreams. A lot of my books were originally a dream or something that I saw in my mind's eye like a film. So, for example, She Wore Red Trainers, the scene where they meet, and in fact I can possibly even find that and possibly even read it to you, because that piece was written in one go. And it didn't change. It was written on a piece of paper, and it was in my head. I wrote it out onto the paper straight away, and it was one of the pieces that did not change throughout the whole editing process, because it was the original story. And it was actually inspired by some of the children, some of the young people that I was working with at the time. And so this is the bit here that was written on paper, straight from the dream, straight from my head, and that is still there in the book now. So this is Ali speaking, and if you've read the book, then you'll know that he goes to play basketball with some boys from the neighborhood. And this is what happens. And I hope you enjoy being read to. I know I do, but nobody reads to me. But I hope that you will enjoy me reading to you, inshallah, before we start the lesson. So, I lost myself in the game and left the others floundering, panting, struggling to keep up, to slow my flow. But none of them could match my focus. Not today. Then came the moment of truth. I held the ball in my hands, my fingers splayed, my palms burning. The others hovered around, breathless, their shoulders heaving. I got ready to shoot my 50th round. Victory was within reach. Then, Zaid! A clear voice rang out across the court. A girl's voice, cutting the air like a knife. A cool wave over the hot tarmac, and I felt the tiny hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Stupidly, I turned to look, and the world stood still. It was a girl, but not like any I'd ever seen. Her black hijab and abaya were stark against the sun-drenched colours of the bleachers. A fresh breeze came and whipped her long hijab up, and it swirled around her like a cloud, like a dream, like a spell. She brought her hand up to move the fabric away from her face, and in that moment I froze as if a bucket of ice had been poured over me. My breath caught in my throat. I noticed everything. The tiny hands, the pale fingernails, the cleft in her chin, its defiant tilt, the nose ring, the piercing eyes, the long eyelashes. I noticed it all in the space of 3.5 seconds, the time it takes to have one look, and in that moment, I smiled without meaning to. An involuntary smile, the kind you get when your heart leaps for no reason, when it skips a beat. Then I looked down, and I saw her trainers, red Converse trainers, just like mine. Whoa. And that's that. That's Ali. The part that particular extract is longer, but I thought I'd share that with you because that part of the story was the scene that I had in a dream, I saw in a dream. And if you know, sometimes you have ideas that just pop into your head almost from nowhere. And that scene was the inspiration for the rest of the book. Another book that was a dream was From Somalia with Love, very much so. I had a dream about the whole story, pretty much from beginning to end, and you know, the story was the result of that. But the thing is, we get ideas from all around us. It could be something we've read, something we've heard, something we've seen on TV, a news article, for example, something that's happened to a friend, something that's happened to us. Ideas are around us all the time. So step one in the framework relates to ideas. So if you're taking notes, write this down. Step one is about working with ideas. Sometimes the idea comes to us like just pops into your head, a story about ... Sometimes it's a dream, sometimes it's something you've read, etc. And when you have an idea that's already popped into your head, what I like to do and what I encourage and invite you to do is to sit down and interrogate that idea. Our ideas, when they come, are rarely packaged, ready to be put into a book and that's it. There's more in that idea. And interrogating the idea is how you get the juice. Because obviously I had a dream about a girl called Amira and a boy called Ali, and the first time they meet at a basketball game. But then what? I have to ask, well, what happens? Who is in this story? When is all of this taking place? Why is this happening? Why is she like that? Why is he like that? And so when you are interrogating the idea, and this doesn't matter what genre you're writing for, and even which age group, I always encourage writers to interrogate the ideas. It's as if you're having like an interview with the idea. And you want to find out really, okay, so where did you come from? Where are you going? Who is involved here? So we want the what, the how, the when, and the why of your idea. Because your ideas will be inspirations for characters, for themes, for topics, for settings, for storylines. So the ideas phase, which is basically working with ideas, whether you are interrogating an idea or simply brainstorming, sitting down and thinking of something to write about, what you want to do is be aware of the things that are in your mind that you've been storing up, that your brain has been storing up, and examine them and say which ones have got something a bit juicier, something interesting, something intriguing, something meaty that you can work with, okay? Because if you are not sure what to write about and you sit down and you brainstorm and you say all the different things you could write about, what you want to start with is something that excites you, something that makes you eager to start writing. But before you can start writing, you do need to interrogate your ideas, interview your ideas to find out the what, the how, the when, and the why. And that really is step one, okay? For example, I won't say the swirling hijab, because the swirling hijab was just very, very simple, 12 lines, I think it was. So I didn't need to do much kind of interrogating. But the interesting thing is, the idea is a girl playing with her mother's hijab. But you can't write a book saying she played with her mother's hijab at the end. You have to go deeper than that. Okay, so you have to start asking, okay, so when she plays, what does she play? Why is she playing? How is she playing? And so that's why you'll see, if you know that story, she makes the hijab a part of her imaginary play. But the imaginary play, if you notice, is quite intentional, because what she does is she enacts different elements of world Muslim cultures. And actually, the illustrator really brings that out, because she plays that it's a fort, she plays that it's a Bedouin tent, she plays that it's a wedding sari. And so you'll see that there was thought that went into that. It wasn't just random playing, it was actually thought through. And it was interrogated and it was interviewed. So the first thing that we want to do, and step one really, is the ideas process. How do we find ideas, and how do we work with ideas, and how do we get our ideas, get the juice from our ideas, get the really meaty ideas to then start working on them, inshallah. So that is step one. Once you've got an idea that you are passionate about, that excites you, then the next stage is the planning stage. Okay, so if I have an idea about writing about an orphan in Ramadan, for example, okay? And that's another thing as well, just as a side note, as an extra tip, is in our industry, especially within the Muslim writers circle, there are certain topics that have been written about a lot. So if you are looking at one of those topics and you want to write a story about them, make sure that you choose an interesting angle. So say I'm going to look at Ramadan, which has been done many times before, as we know, but I'm going to look at it from an orphan's point of view. So my next step is to ask myself 3 questions. What is the story? Who is the story for? And how am I going to tell this story? I'll repeat that. What is the story? Who is the story for? And how am I going to tell this story? What is the story obviously comes from step 1. Okay, so you've had an idea, you've interrogated the idea, so now you know what the story is actually going to be about. But the second question, who is the story for, is very, very important, because I could write a young adult novel about an orphan in Ramadan. I could write an adult novel about it. I could write something factual, something non-fiction. I could write a poem about it. I could write it as a picture book. I could write it as a chapter book. So the age group of the reader, the ideal reader, and a bit more about the reader, the more you have your ideal reader in mind, the more you will be able to write something that really speaks to that particular reader. Okay, a lot of times I find that people want to write a book that will be loved by everyone, all different ages, adults, men, women, children, everything. Okay, and yes, there are some books that do transcend ages and do transcend gender and transcend religion, etc. There are books like that. But you may find it easier to focus on your ideal reader and write especially for that reader. So if you're writing a picture book, for example, don't expect 12 and 14-year-olds to read it and enjoy it, because it's not for them. They read a different type of book. And if you want to write for them, then you need to have them in mind. You need to keep them firmly in mind. What kind of language will you use? What kind of topics will you address? You know, what kind of storytelling techniques will you use to appeal to a 12-year-old, to appeal to a 14-year-old, to appeal to, you know, a young unmarried student, for example, okay, with like a chick lit type of book. So bearing in mind who the story is being written for is very, very important. And then third, how you're going to tell the story. Again, is it going to be prose? Is it going to be a novel? Is it going to be non-fiction? Is it going to be based on case studies? Is it going to be a poem? Is it going to be a rhyming picture book? Is it going to be a chapter book? How you're going to tell the story, you need to have that clear before you even write a single word. So those three questions again: what is the story? Who is the story for? And how am I going to tell this story? Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3 now is writing. The best part. And there's some rules to this writing at this stage, okay? A lot of people skip to step 4 when they should still be in step 3, because step 3 is writing without editing. Remember we talked about shutting out the noise? This is the stage when you write shutting out the noise. Even your internal editor is not allowed to get involved here, okay? What you want to do, what you're aiming to do, is write a complete first draft. Boom! It doesn't matter if you make spelling mistakes, make grammatical errors, if it doesn't flow, you just want to get your first draft down. Get the first draft out of your head, out of your system, onto the paper, okay? Then take a deep breath. Come away. Then you come back to do step 4. So step 3 is just head down writing, okay? We're not correcting, we're not reading it back to ourselves, we're just getting it out of the way. And on another note, actually, in step 2, when you've asked yourself those 3 questions, what is the story, who am I writing it for, and how am I going to tell the story? If you find that there are some question marks in your story or in your book project, okay, gaps, okay, places, things that you don't know, things that you need to find out, that's part of step 2 as well, the research. So if you need to do interviews, that's step 2. You don't write anything until you've done this. So you don't go to step 3 if you know, like I said to you with Far From Home, I couldn't write that book without doing research. There was no way, because there were too many things I did not know. Okay, so I had to do a lot of reading. So my step 2 for Far From Home was very long. Similarly with From My Sister's Lips, I couldn't write the book without interviewing the sisters. So my step 2 was very long. My step 2 was about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months of interviewing sisters. And I remember lots of sessions of sitting and interviewing sisters and then transcribing all their interviews. And then I could move on to step 3. So you see how the framework helps you to not kind of run on ahead and then get stuck. Because once you've got your idea, you've interrogated the idea. Okay, because sometimes, so if you don't mind me digressing, sometimes, and this is why I want to explain the importance of going step by step. Because sometimes you have an idea, but you haven't interrogated it. So it sounds like a great idea. You start writing, okay, you haven't really planned it much, but you start writing, and then you get stuck. What happens next? Who's this character? What's going on? Oh, the story's not going anywhere. That's because you didn't take step 1 and then take step 2. Okay, so step 1 is not to be sniffed at. Really interrogating your ideas. If you're writing a novel, that's the stage that you actually plan out your novel as much as you can. If it's a non-fiction book, that's the stage at which you do your outline. You really take time to think about all the different elements that you're going to include in the book. Okay, even if it's a picture book, you still want to have a really good grasp of the story before you even start writing. Okay, so once you've done step 1 and you've interrogated your idea, and step 2, you know who you're writing this for and how you're going to tell the story, hopefully by this time you have a much clearer picture. Sometimes even like it's a film in your head or a cartoon, and you can see the story playing out. Then stage 3 is so much easier because you've done the legwork, okay? You've got the foundations, and now you can start to build on the foundations. I hope that that makes sense, because it's really important, because people do get stuck because they haven't taken a step-by-step systematic approach to their writing project. So we were on stage 3. Step 3 is writing without editing. Free writing, okay? Now you've done the homework, you've done the legwork, now you can simply write the story. If there's anything missing at this stage, you just put a star and you move on, okay? We don't want to keep going back and forth, we just want to get that first draft out, because sometimes you will find that the story moves in a direction you didn't expect, and you realize, oh, I've got a gap here, I don't really know what this is. My advice to you, put a star and keep writing. You're going to get to that later, because step 4, my favorite, absolute favorite step, is now that, remember, you finished it in step 3, you finished your draft, you went away, took a breath, you looked him away, then you came back, and now you are ready for step 4. And step 4 is to read your work out loud. I know that sounds strange, but you would be surprised at what you can pick up as the writer in terms of inconsistencies, in terms of awkwardness in the language, in terms of the way the characters sound, whatever it is that you're writing. You would be surprised how much of it you can pick up yourself when you read your work back to yourself out loud. It's very important. Because a lot of the time when we're writing, we have the sentences already in our head, so we just write. And we assume that we have written what we had in our head. And when we read it back to ourselves quietly, silently, sometimes you're still telling the same story in your head. But what you need to do is read out loud exactly what you have written to make sure that it is congruent with the version in your head. Okay, when you're at that stage, you're asking yourself if it flows, does it sound right? You know, is there anything jumping out at you that's like, oh, no. If that's the case, you want to make a note. Make a note. Once you've done that a couple of times and you've picked up any areas that don't seem to be right to you, then you're ready now for step 5. And step 5 is now the editing stage, which is not as much fun, but it's also very important, because if you skip this stage, you end up with work that's shoddy, that has inconsistencies, and that makes another editor's life really, really difficult. And she's thinking to herself, didn't she read it before she sent it to me? And you don't want to be that writer. You do not want to be that writer who sends unedited work to the editor. You're thinking to yourself, that's the editor's job, that's what they're supposed to do. No. Your job is to make that manuscript as polished as you can make it. Absolutely polished as you can make it. That means you do your due diligence. You read it out loud to check if it flows, to check if the language is working the way you want it to. Does it sound the way you want it to sound? And then you start the next level of editing, which is going in deep with the spelling, with the grammar, any gaps that you identified that you kind of weren't sure of. Now you can go back and research them, make any corrections at this stage. You want to do a rewrite, you want to do a rework, okay? This might be where you write your second draft, okay? And to be 100% honest with you, most of our books, all those books on the shelf, have been through at least 2 drafts. Some of them many more than that. Black Sheep went through, I think, 3 or 4 drafts. She Will Read Trainers went through a lot of drafts as well. And with Black Sheep, I actually got the proof copy, which is the one that the printer sends, and everyone's done their work already editing, and then the printer sends a copy for you to see it before he actually starts to do the run. And I actually made big changes in the proof copy because I wasn't happy with the way the plot was working out, and also because I had just done a course on plotting. And I thought that the plot in Black Sheep could be really tightened up a lot more. And subhanAllah, that is probably the least known of my books, but it's the one that people commented on the plot the most. And remember I said to you about having a learner's mind? I had just done a course on plotting, and that was what allowed me to review and revise Black Sheep so that the plot was 100% tight, mashallah. Okay, so we can use tools at this stage. We can use the online tools, the spell check, the grammar check. We can use a thesaurus. If we're finding that we're using the same words again and again, maybe we want to switch it up a little bit. Use a thesaurus to find alternatives to what you're using right now, just to keep it fresh, keep it snappy. Okay, you can use a dictionary, you can use an app like Grammarly. This is really for you to get that manuscript as tight as possible without the involvement of an editor or a copy editor. They will no doubt have something to say about what you've written, but your job is to make sure that you've done your very best with it, okay? And after this stage, you've got step 6. And step 6 is working with beta readers. Okay, and I have very strong opinions on beta readers because a lot of us share our work with people who, quite frankly, don't know what they're talking about. So all they say is, it's great, or mashallah, it's lovely, I love it, which is always nice to hear, you know, no doubt it's nice to hear. But what you want to do when you're looking for beta readers is you want to ask people who know what they're talking about, okay? Who are avid readers, who are writers possibly, they can be editors, they could be teachers maybe, librarians. Anyone with that type of expertise would be a fantastic beta reader for you. Okay, and again, it depends on the project, because if it's an article for a magazine, maybe somebody who is the target reader of that magazine is fine. If it's a children's picture book, you're better off asking a teacher or a librarian or somebody who actually, you know, is a big children's book fan to give you some feedback. If it's a young adult novel, you really want to be asking either somebody who's a writer, an editor, a librarian, or even a young adult who is an avid reader, who is your ideal reader. But not just anyone, not just any kid, someone who reads a lot and is actually gonna give you some real feedback on your manuscript. So step 6 will be working with beta readers. And when they come back to you, you're going to take on board what they've said, you're going to do revisions again, and then you decide what to do next. Will you publish it? Will you self-publish it? Will you put it on your blog? Will you put it on your Instagram? Will you put it in your WhatsApp group? That, my dear sister, is entirely up to you. But now that you have a 6-step framework, you can literally lather, rinse and repeat, and do that again and again and again. And inshallah you will, because this is just the beginning for you, inshallah. I know how difficult it can be sometimes for us to, you know, enact our dreams or to hold on to our dreams of writing and actually push forward and see the results that we want to see. And so for me, really, it's such a privilege for me to be able to share what I've learned with you and make more opportunities available for you to learn more. And speaking of learning more, if you would like to learn more about the 6-step framework, if you would like to really master your mindset and your habits and get these skills down, and you'd like to have me as your teacher and as your coach and as your mentor, then I'm very, very pleased to announce that the Ultimate Muslimah Writers Masterclass is going to be open for enrollments. Inshallah ta'ala, I will be running the first class of the Muslimah Writers Masterclass starting next week, and I would love for you to join us. I will be putting a link to find out more about the masterclass. So I hope that you'll click through, have a read. I'm really looking forward to working with a class of sisters to go through each of these steps, class by class. Obviously, there'll be video trainings, there'll be downloads, there will be assignments. So you will get to actually practice and get really solid with these 6 steps with my guidance. I will be giving live guidance and Q&A every week during the course. I will be in a private Facebook group with my students. We will be doing group reviews and group critiques and keeping each other accountable. And I suspect that doing the masterclass together will mean that we achieve better results. So this is not a course where you just get the materials and off you go. I will be there with you, holding your hand from the beginning of the course to the end, to make sure that you get clear on the techniques, that you master the skills, and in 30 days, you have the confidence. You've established the habits and you have learned the skills to inspire the world with your writing. And that, my dear, is my dream for you. And that's my invitation to you. So please do click on the link and join us on the course, inshallah. I cannot wait to let this masterclass kick off because it's going to be crazy.